A lot of people misunderstand me. That's because they don't know me. I guess that's true. People believe a lot of crazy stories they read.
Yeah.
Some is true, some is not. And
does it hurt when you see those crazy stories?
sometimes. But it's part of the work, you know.
You ever want to lash out in any type of way and say, hey, that's not true?
Yeah, a lot of times.
Welcome to How It Really Happened. I'm Hill Harper. He is the definition of a music icon, a singer-songwriter whose catalog of hit songs defined a generation. His innovative dancing unmatched, his videos classics, his style singular. But Michael Jackson was also a father of three whose life was dogged by scandals. And then, June 25th, 2009, many thought the biggest news story of the day would be the death of Farrah Fawcett, but how wrong they were. Tonight, we examine the death of Michael Jackson. How did he die? Why did he die? Was something more sinister going on? Did he, in fact, cause his own death? We hear from those who lived through it and find out how it really happened.
I thought June 25th, 2009 was going to be pretty much of an easy day for me.
Michael Jackson, the king of pop, we're told by our affiliates in Los Angeles, has been rushed to a local hospital.
I remember getting back to my office at Inside Edition, and we were putting the Farrah Fawcett story together, and we heard a news alert.
Jackson only just recently signed a deal to do a whole bunch of concerts in London.
We're covering this story for you, the hospitalization of Michael Jackson, the king of pop.
I got a note from the president of the company to jump on a plane and go to Los Angeles.
Both the Los Angeles Times and CBS News are both now reporting
Michael Jackson has died. Let me just say this, and I believe this to be true. This is not hyperbole. I think the world stopped. Everything stopped. No one paid attention to politics. No one paid attention to anything else.
The demonstrations of mourning, the candlelight vigils, the tears for this man, it really underscored what a worldwide superstar he was.
It was shocking because this was a young man. This was someone that was about to begin a tour. And so immediately you wonder why, how, what happened? Something's not right.
How did he die? Who killed him?
Who was with him? Who saw him last? What was he doing?
It couldn't have been deliberate, could it?
It just kept growing and growing and growing until everything started to unfold and unravel. And boy, what an avalanche.
You had some concerns about the physicians and the people who were around him.
I can't get into that, but I don't like what happened.
The family, and rightfully so, were very suspicious about what happened.
How do you think he died? You've been quoted as saying you believe it may have been murder. Do you still think that?
Absolutely.
Why?
Absolutely.
Why are you so sure?
I would never, ever think differently. Because, first of all, Michael told me that they were going to murder him. He was afraid. He was afraid for his life. Who was going to murder him?
She suggested he was worth more dead than alive, and consequently, people wanted him dead. The death of Michael Jackson was a shock to everybody across the world. He was just 50 years old, the king of pop. But the truth is, the events that led to it began 25 years before.
I am hard-pressed to think of a bigger star than Michael Jackson was in the 70s and 80s. I remember seeing him like on programs like The Ed Sullivan Show and whatnot. I always remember Michael Jackson as that little tiny kid singing ABC and doing those swirls around and his brothers in syncopation behind him. What a talent he was.
After Off the Wall, Michael Jackson just exploded. A couple of years later with Thriller. It changed the sound of the 80s.
The most iconic moment for me of Michael Jackson was the Motown 25 performance.
Michael Jackson was singing Billie Jean, and something just happened. What was that? He had done this moonwalk, and it looked like there was a special effect that the stage was being pulled because nobody had ever seen this before. It was unbelievable.
He was the king of pop. And, you know, you can just go, everyone knew if you did that, you knew Michael Jackson.
In the early 1980s, Michael Jackson was on top of the world. And Pepsi-Cola hired him to make this incredible music video commercial. It was going to be big. Unfortunately, when you look back, it's also what caused the downfall of Michael Jackson.
In 1984, the Jacksons were about to embark on the Victory Tour, with, of course, Michael Jackson as part of the stage show. He didn't need any money. He didn't drink Pepsi. In fact, he wanted nothing to do with Pepsi sponsoring the tour. Part of the deal was that they had to shoot a Pepsi commercial. Michael obviously didn't really want to do this, but was cajoled by his brothers into doing it. On 27th of January, the Jacksons shot the commercial. It was on the final take, as Michael was descending some stairs. A pyrotechnic went off just beside his head, about 2 feet away, and his hair caught fire. Watching the video today, you can see his hair starting to smolder, people running on from the side of the stage, putting a jacket over his head to try and douse the flames, and throwing him to the floor. What actually happened was that Michael had suffered third-degree burns and was rushed to hospital.
That was really the beginning of the end for him, in the sense that he was in so much pain that he had to take painkillers, and he ended up becoming addicted to them.
There was so much damage to his scalp, he started delving into plastic surgeries and then got deeper and deeper into it.
His appearance started to change. His nose changed, the color of his skin changed.
He looked different from album to album. It looked like a transformation in front of your eyes.
He became a client of a guy called Dr. Arnie Klein in Beverly Hills, who calls himself the father of dermatology and cosmetic surgery. And the rumors are that Jackson not only saw Dr. Klein to have cosmetic treatments, but also to get access to Demerol, which is one of the drugs that was used as a painkiller at the time.
Why did you give Michael Jackson Demerol?
I said before, because I rebuilt his face. His face had full of scars. His nose had collapsed. I had to rebuild his chin.
Dr. Arnie Klein told me that Michael Jackson had a compulsion.
Thus, we see the multiple nose jobs, the jawline, the dimple in the chin. There came a time when they actually put some whiskers into his upper face and around his chin line. And he then didn't like them, so then they were taken out again. He's the one who made the tattoo around the hairline so it didn't look like Michael was losing his hair. He tattooed the eyebrows and around the eyes and the lips.
You too, if you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and then make a change.
I think Michael Jackson's affinity, shall we say, for plastic surgery was born out of the fact that he didn't really have a childhood. He didn't know who he was. So he would look at the man in the mirror and try to figure out, who is this man in the mirror?
When you look in the mirror, are you happy with what you see?
In what way?
Just when you look there, in terms of that social philosophy.
I'm never totally satisfied.
While Michael Jackson is getting all this cosmetic surgery, he's living at home with his parents. Then in 1988, he got the courage to buy a ranch he called Neverland, and he moved out. And I think many people close to him would tell you that's when he started making the worst decisions of his life.
Welcome to Larry King Live.
Good evening from Washington. Michael Jackson has been through endless press speculation, but now there's a new shock, and it's no tabloid tale about sleeping in oxygen tanks or trying to buy the Elephant Man. The famous pop star is at the center of a Los Angeles Police Department criminal probe.
In 1993, totally out of the blue, Michael Jackson faced some very, very serious and potentially damaging child abuse allegations.
2 of his homes in Southern California were searched this weekend.
I was told the police were at his ranch in Santa Barbara County and at his condo in Beverly Hills. Figure out what's happening. It didn't take me long to get a copy of the police report and the child welfare report, which said clearly allegations of sexual molestation. I couldn't believe it. After we broke the story, it seemed like a long, long time that we heard no reaction from Michael Jackson himself. And then one day, there was a live satellite feed that we were all told to tune into at a certain time and record.
I wish to convey my deepest gratitude for your love and support.
And there was Michael Jackson.
There have been many disgusting statements made recently concerning allegations of improper conduct on my part. These statements about me are totally false.
It was simply Michael Jackson on camera saying that he had settled these horrible allegations, that there was no truth to them, that he would never hurt a child, that he loved children.
I ask all of you to wait and hear the truth before you label or condemn me. Don't treat me like a criminal, because I am innocent. I have been...
The impression that everybody had was, boy, that was weird.
What's crucial about that tape is actually for the first time explaining or almost apologizing for undergoing treatment for some sort of chronic addiction.
After my tour ended, I remained out of the country undergoing treatment for a dependency on pain medication. This medication was initially prescribed to see the excruciating pain that I was suffering after recent reconstructive surgery on my scalp.
In 1993, nobody thought anything about that. But now, looking back, you can see that that was the first time that the alarm bells should have rung. The family wouldn't let it drop. Instead of going to court, Michael Jackson offered them a $20 million settlement, which obviously they accepted.
He never wanted to settle. He wanted to go the full distance to prove his innocence. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't realize he was forced to settle by his insurance company.
However, settling out of court did nothing to prove Michael's innocence. And in fact, people around the world were saying, where there's smoke, there's fire.
In focus tonight, Michael Jackson's ranch is searched in connection with an accusation of child molestation.
In 2003, it was a shock. All of a sudden, the accusation is Michael Jackson has done it again.
How you doing? Sheriff's Department, we have a search warrant?
This time more serious, this time criminal. This time the Sheriff's Department descends on Michael Jackson's Neverland Ranch and raids the ranch, looking for evidence of molestation.
Are there any secret rooms?
The family accused Michael of all kinds of stuff, but the nub of the accusation were 12 counts of child molestation.
The whole thing turned into a media circus.
Michael Jackson was coming to the courthouse, but it felt more like one of his concerts.
Most people will remember the arraignment not for anything that happened inside of the courtroom. Most people remember what happened outside of the courtroom. And we went to the SUV and kind of pushed through the crowds, and his security detail was leading him through. And next thing I know, he's on top of the SUV. And I turned to Ben Brofman, who was my co-counsel, and Ben's response was, if we don't get this under control, next thing you know, he's going to show up in his pajamas.
Tonight, is that a pajama party? No way. It's Michael Jackson and his entourage showing up over an hour late to court and wearing his pajamas.
We called it Pajama Drama Day. And I remember walking in and I said to him, Mr. Jackson, are you okay? And he just looked over at me, sort of over my head. And I thought, wow, he must be on some sort of pain medication.
Just an incredible showdown between this 15-year-old boy and this world-renowned pop star.
Did not appear to me to be a case that should have ever reached the criminal justice system.
We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty.
Michael Jackson will be walking out of this courtroom a free man.
He was found not guilty, but in the court of public opinion, he was never really vindicated.
He quickly disappeared from America, went overseas, and we didn't see him for a long time.
He was deeply in debt. He owed people money all over the place to the tune of $400-odd million. And that's what really fueled his drug addiction. That's why I made my prediction. Unless Michael got people around him who genuinely had his best interests at heart, he was a house of cards. He was going to die.
When Michael Jackson announced at that famous news conference the This Is It residency at the O2, that day, that morning, was a train wreck.
Welcome back to Showbiz Tonight. I'm A.J. Hammer in New York. Tonight, Michael's big return. Yes, the one-time king of pop came face-to-face with his fans today to announce his big return to the stage.
In 2009, plans were put in place for Michael Jackson to make a comeback tour. Now, this was going to be done at the O2 venue in London, a venue owned by AEG, who were the promoters behind the concerts.
Michael Jackson had several motivations. One of them, of course, was money. He was desperately in need of cash flow. But another was reputation and legacy. He knew that Prince held the record for the most shows in a residency at O2, and he wanted to break that. Initially, they announced 10. Eventually, they announced 50 shows, and that would have set a record.
The concert series is being called This Is It. Atika, are we buying that? Is this it for Michael Jackson on stage?
It doesn't seem like this is the absolute last chance to see Michael Jackson live, but then again, you never know.
When Michael Jackson announced at that famous news conference the This Is It residency at the O2, that day, that morning, was a train wreck.
Earlier that day, Randy Phillips, who was part of the AEG live team putting on the performance, was holed up in a hotel with Michael Jackson.
Phillips said that Michael appeared to be drunk. He couldn't get dressed. He couldn't go. He couldn't hardly speak. Phillips acknowledges that he physically slapped Michael in order to get him to snap out of it, and he threw him in the shower. This is the king of pop being thrown into a shower in order to go and sober up.
When they got to the O2, Michael Jackson appeared somewhat shambolic, in a haze, not really knowing where he was, what he was doing. It was very much ad-libbed. A lot of cases, I love yous, I'll be back. This is it. This is the last time.
This is it.
And then he was gone.
And there we go. Thank you very much for one more time, ladies and gentlemen, the king of pop, Michael Jackson. Was that weird for you too?
4 minutes it lasted, and he was gone, leaving the stunned host, Dermot O'Leary, to announce that the tickets for 10 shows, and remember, it was 10 shows, would go on sale, and the date of sale, Friday the 13th.
Kai Chase joins us, personal chef to Michael Jackson during the final months of his life. Would you say, just from observation, that he looked in good health, except for a little tired from rehearsing?
He looked very well to me in April. Yes, he did.
Did he ever have any health complaints?
No, never anything like that. I remember one day, the third day I was there, when I came back, he had told me, you know, they're killing me. They're killing me because I'm working too much.
Problem was Michael Jackson had to be in shape and had to be ready. He had to be fit. He had to be psychologically ready. Michael Jackson made one demand. I want a doctor.
In 2006, Michael Jackson was in Las Vegas, and his children weren't particularly well, suffering from a bit of influenza. So naturally, he needed a doctor, or he wanted a doctor to look over them. The doctor that turned up that night was Dr. Conrad Murray.
What do we know about Dr. Conrad Murray? Cardiologist, offices he had in Las Vegas and Houston.
He was struggling financially in many ways. He had 4 children by 3 separate women outside his marriage, and he was supporting all those children.
I guess through his interactions with Dr. Murray, Michael Jackson said, "You should be my personal doctor," and then influenced AEG to hire him to do the This Is It tour, even though AEG didn't want him to be hired.
I said, "It's crazy to take a doctor with us because you're in London." He said, "You don't understand. My body is the machine that fuels this entire business venture, and I'm like Barack Obama. I need my own physician on the road." And he was so strong about it that I just backed off and said, "This is a battle I can't win."
What the world didn't know at the time, but later came out in trial, is that primarily what he was looking for was to get sleep, which he desperately needed, and had trouble sleeping for years but prior to that. Shortly after being hired by Michael Jackson, Conrad Murray started ordering massive shipments of propofol to an acquaintance's home in California. He actually told the pharmacist who he was ordering from that he had a clinic in California that he was using all this propofol for. But as far as we know, it was all meant for one person, Michael Jackson.
He was addicted to propofol, which is a drug that really should be administered only in a hospital setting, not in a residential setting.
Is an anesthetic. When you have surgery, usually light surgery, it's the anesthetic they use to put you to sleep.
The Jackson-Murray fit was perfect for both of them. Murray was providing Jackson with the drugs he needed. Jackson was providing Murray with the money he needed. What's interesting about Dr. Conrad Murray is AEG Live seemed not to have vetted him prior to engaging his services. In fact, Paul Gongwe of AEG Live said they often hired people based on the artist's recommendation. What's interesting about Paul Gongwe is he also worked with Elvis in 1977 when Elvis Presley died of a drug overdose. Perhaps if anyone should have seen the warning signs, it should have been Paul Gongwe.
Michael Jackson was so stressed out about the possibility of not being ready, not being able to perform at the shows in London, that he told his son Prince that they want to kill me.
How it really happened. Dr. Conrad Murray accepted $150,000 a month from concert promoters AEG Live to be Michael Jackson's personal doctor. But what was his priority? Keeping Michael healthy or AEG happy? Any crime show will tell you have to follow the evidence. When it came to Michael Jackson's death, the trail of evidence began months before as he prepped for This Is It.
This is it. I mean, this is really it. This is the final curtain call.
When Michael Jackson announced his first 10 concerts here, one question was asked a lot. Can he do it? Now he's planning 50 shows. But the organisers still insist these fans won't be disappointed.
It appeared to be a ticking time bomb, the whole This Is It tour.
The rehearsals began in Los Angeles. They rented a home for Michael Jackson in Beverly Hills.
In the weeks before he died, they had moved the rehearsals to the Staples Center, to a big space more like the O2 Arena in London.
The truth was, Michael Jackson was having a tough time getting to rehearsal every single day.
He was exhausted. He was losing weight. He didn't sleep. That led to his dependence on painkillers and propofol. He was really a mess. He was in no fit state to do 10 shows, let alone 50.
At one rehearsal, he had chills, and they had to put a blanket around him. He was losing weight. The autopsy showed he was 136 pounds.
Michael Jackson was so stressed out about the possibility of not being ready. he told his son, Prince, that they want to kill me. They're going to kill me. What Michael feared, and the reason he feared it was he had been told this. He said, if you don't make these shows happen, if you don't show up for rehearsal, if you don't get up on that stage, if you don't do these shows, you are ruined. Because the contract Michael had with AEG put it on him. If everything collapsed, it came out of Michael's bank. The last couple of weeks at the rehearsal, I mean, there's security camera video that shows Michael looking like a ghost, dressed in a blanket. I mean, we're talking about June. We found out only years later the propofol infusions that he had been getting for 60 days, almost every night for 2 months, had robbed him of his sleep, because the expert testimony showed that when you are put under on propofol, it may seem like sleep, but there's no REM sleep. There is no documented case of any human going that long without REM sleep.
It was like the old Judy Garland Hollywood days. Instead of saying, stop the production, let's figure out what's wrong with our star, they just let it keep going.
AEG Live were concerned that Michael Jackson was missing a number of rehearsals. So what they did is they held a number of crises meetings at Carroll Mansion with Jackson present, and in fact, Dr. Murray present as well. During these meetings, Jackson was read the riot act. He had to get his act together. He had to turn up to rehearsals, and his career was on the line.
Randy Phillips told Conrad Murray, it's your job, you get him there.
Michael had used propofol long before Dr. Murray came on the scene. So when he was hired, I think he was somewhat shocked that Michael was dependent on propofol to sleep.
And then all of a sudden, towards the end, it got better.
In court, they showed 2 of the last performances Michael Jackson ever did. One of them was The Way You Make Me Feel. This was 2 nights before his death, and it was great. It really reinforced everyone's confidence that we're going to make these shows happen. And then the next night, the one that will really make you cry is the last song he sang, the Earth Song.
Did you ever stop to notice all the children dead from war? Did you ever stop to notice this crying earth as we make sure?
He was in good spirits. He said goodbye to the crew, to the staff. He headed home. Little did he know, he would never return to that arena.
Hold for applause, slow umbrella fade out.
A few hours later, he was dead.
Michael Jackson gets home around 1 a.m. on June 25th, 2009, the last day of his life. Conrad Murray is already at his house.
During the rehearsals for the tour, Michael would come home late at night, and Murray would meet him there. And the first thing he'd do would be put him on a saline drip, because Michael would become very dehydrated during rehearsals. In fact, Jackson couldn't go to sleep. He'd give him some sedatives.
According to court records, Conrad Murray tried a number of different things, and then he wouldn't sleep. Then hours later, he tried something else.
Conrad Murray said that he gave Michael Jackson some propofol between 10:40 and 10:50 a.m.
He said that Michael Jackson drifted off. He went to sleep.
Then went for a toilet break himself and came back into the room at around 11:02 to find Michael Jackson not breathing.
When did you realize he was in trouble?
Was what?
When did you realize he was in trouble?
Michael?
Yes.
When I came back into the room.
Conrad Murray said when he came back, he noticed that Michael wasn't breathing and that something was off with the IV tube. And what he is saying is that Michael Jackson did something himself to get more propofol into his system.
Take me to that terrible day.
Kai Chase, Jackson's personal chef, was downstairs at the mansion that morning.
Around 12:05, 12:10, Dr. Murray comes down the stairs, and there's a stairwell that leads into the kitchen. And he's screaming, hurry, go get Prince, call security, get Prince. So
Prince is?
Michael Jackson's eldest son. So I drop everything that I'm doing, and I run into the den, which is very close to the kitchen, and I go get Prince.
Why do you think the doctor called for Prince?
Well, I think, at that point, he may have panicked, and
the doctor panicked?
It just seemed like he was in a panicked state. He called for Prince, he called for security, just somebody that was allowed to go upstairs. So the energy in the house had just kind of changed from that happy kind of day that we were having to just kind of eerie.
He then reaches for his own cell phone, and he calls Michael Amir Williams, who is Michael Jackson's assistant, and he said, send security to the bedroom. Doesn't ask him to call 911, but security.
Please state your name for the record.
Alberto Alvarez.
Alberto Alvarez, head of logistics for Michael's security team, he rushes to the house and up to that bedroom.
When I walked into the room and I turned towards my right, I observed Mr. Conrad Murray giving chest compressions to Mr. Jackson. He said, Alberto, hurry, we have to get him to a hospital. We have to get an ambulance. And I asked Dr. Conrad Murray what happened, and he said he had a reaction. He had a bad reaction. So while I was standing at the foot of the bed, he reached over and grabbed a handful of vials, and then he reached out to me and said, here, put these in a bag. I looked towards my right, and there was a plastic bag sitting on top of a chair. Okay. And so I proceeded to get the bag. I opened it, and he placed the vials in the bag. He then pointed to the IV stand, and he said, now, get that bag and put it in the blue bag. The IV stand was at my eye level, and I was able to notice that at the bottom of the bag, there was what appeared to me like a milky white substance, sir.
Okay. At that time, did Conrad Murray instruct you to call 911?
Yes, sir.
I need an ambulance as soon as possible, sir. We have a gentleman here that needs help, and he's not breathing.
Fire paramedic 33, what is the address of emergency?
Yes, sir. I need an ambulance as soon as possible, sir. We have a gentleman here that needs help, and he's not breathing yet. He's not breathing, and we're trying to pump him, but he's not.
Okay. Did anybody witness what happened?
No, just the doctor, sir. The doctor's been the only one here.
That horrible day, Michael Jackson's team security member, Alberto Alvarez, called 911. And right after he hung up, Fahim Muhammad, the head of the security team, arrived in the room and was right there with Murray and Alvarez.
Fahim was coming in through the foyer. I believe I said, it's not looking well, or it's not looking good. Then Dr. Conrad Murray asked if anyone knew CPR. Fahim, actually, we kind of looked at each other for a split second, and I turned and went to assist Dr. Conrad Murray to do CPR.
And what, if anything, did Dr. Murray say as he was giving mouth-to-mouth?
After a couple or a few breaths that he breathed into Mr. Jackson, he came up and he said, this is the first time I do mouth-to-mouth, but I have to. He's my friend.
On June 25th, 2009, I was assigned to Fire Station 71. The alarm sound comes on over the system and says 50-year-old male, cardiac arrest, 100 North Carrollwood. As we approached the scene, there were multiple security people, and they were all signaling for us to go upstairs. Walking into the room, one of the first observations that I made was that there was a doctor standing there. The gentleman identified himself as such, and that there were IV pulls and oxygen tanks. This being the middle of the afternoon, very unusual, made me think perhaps this patient has a chronic illness.
He wanted to know what medicines the doctor had given him. I mean, there's an IV pole there. And Conrad Murray said nothing. He said he didn't give Michael Jackson anything. Then he admitted he gave him a low dose of lorazepam, one of the sedatives. He never mentioned propofol or any other drugs. The paramedics believe that Michael Jackson was dead for 20 to 60 minutes, somewhere in there, before they arrived. Because Michael Jackson was cool to the touch, he was flatlined on the EKG, the paramedics did not believe that it had just happened the way Conrad Murray explained to them.
After I assisted in carrying the patient down the stairs, I went back up the stairs to gather our equipment. At that point, that's where I saw Dr. Murray picking up, I couldn't tell what, and putting them in a bag. He was alone in the room at that time, and the look on his face was that of obvious surprise. When it was time to leave, I went out the front door of the house with Dr. Murray, and at that point, I saw that our ordinary call had become extraordinary. There was a double-deck tour bus with people standing on it. There were people in the street, cameras, a phenomenal amount of chaos going on.
You are trespassing. You need to move off of the property.
Our photographer that was on the scene looked inside through the window of the fire truck that had accompanied the ambulance, and he saw on the screen it said 50-year-old male not breathing. And when I heard that, I knew Michael was 50 years old. We started to think for the first time, wow, this could be here for Michael. After the gurney loaded into the ambulance, the security kind of moved everyone away from the gate area.
Once we got backed up, I heard a thump against the side window. I looked over, and someone had taken a camera and was running down the street with their camera lens against the window.
As it turned out, it was one of the biggest paparazzi photos of all time.
When we arrived at the hospital and proceeded inside, we went into one of the treatment rooms where there was a large gathering of technicians, nurses, the doctor who's in charge, and the doctor in charge spoke with Dr. Murray.
This is hard. My brother, the legendary king of pop, Michael Jackson, passed away on Thursday, June 25th, 2009 at 2:26 p.m.
There were a lot of questions raised when he was in that ambulance being taken to the hospital and after he was declared dead. Who killed him? Was it an overdose? Did he have a heart attack?
How did this happen? How did Michael Jackson die? Did he cause his own death? Or was it caused by somebody else?
Dr. Conrad Murray's defense's theory was that Michael Jackson had done something while Murray was out of the room and leading to his own death.
This was not an OD. The coroners told me immediately that the only drug that was in Michael's body was the drug that was administered to him that night. And that was it. He was totally clean.
Do you think we'll ever find out the truth?
I'm going to make sure we do.
So what really happened that morning in North Carolwood? Conrad Murray turned down our request for an interview, but in a new book, he says that Michael Jackson was still alive when he arrived at the UCLA Medical Center. Is he telling the truth? The twists and turns of the investigation next time on part 2, the death of Michael Jackson. How it really happened. Good night.
Do you feel as though you missed out on something by not remembering, not performing?
Of course, but I've gained a lot too. A lot of people never get out of their hometown, get to see other wonderful places. A lot of kids read about things that I get to see in person all over the world, different places. So I'm so happy about that. I mean, you never can have everything.
Hey everyone. Welcome to How It Really Happened. I'm Hill Harper. June 25th, 2009. Paramedics rushed to answer a call at 100 North Carrollwood in Los Angeles. They were told they would find a 50-year-old male not breathing. They found Michael Jackson, unconscious on a bed in a rented mansion and in such a state that the lead paramedic firefighter said he didn't even recognize him. Tonight, part 2 of our examination of the death of Michael Jackson. What really happened? Did he kill himself? Was it an overdose? Or was he murdered?
In all my years as a paramedic, I had never seen that level of chaos at any incident I've ever been at.
I could see kind of through the hinge area of the fence that there was a gurney being wheeled out to the ambulance, and I could tell that it was Michael on the gurney. So at that point, I told my photographers, we really need to try to get this picture when the ambulance pulls out.
Once the patient and the equipment was loaded in the ambulance, myself and Dr. Murray got into the ambulance and then started backing out of the driveway. At that point, that's when I knew that this was not an ordinary call.
His staff during that time looked like I've never seen them before in any situation. They looked very afraid and frightened, and this was a security team that was always in charge and had a plan.
When we arrived at the hospital, there were already some people there, and the private security that Mr. Jackson had immediately formed a corridor so that we could get the patient into the hospital. We unloaded the patient, went through the doors where the emergency room staff was waiting for us.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Michael Jackson, the king of pop, we're told by our affiliates in Los Angeles, has been rushed to a local hospital.
I love you very much.
What a long, strange trip it has been for Michael Jackson, from child star to creator of the best-selling album ever.
Hopefully, you know, that's what I do with my music, bring happiness to people and to bring joy, bring some peace in their lives.
Reclusive billionaire and criminal defendant, but famous or infamous, one of the best-known people on the planet ever.
Alan Duke of CNN is over at the UCLA Medical Center.
They're not saying anything here at the hospital. In fact, many of the hospital employees don't know, or at least didn't know, what was going on.
We didn't know about Dr. Murray at that point. We didn't know that Michael had a personal physician who had every night been giving him this propofol infusion to treat his insomnia. Who would have imagined that?
Tonight, what we know about how he died, how he is being remembered, and how he lived.
When we arrived at the hospital and proceeded inside, we went into one of the treatment rooms where there was a large gathering of technicians, nurses, the doctor who's in charge, and the doctor in charge spoke with Dr. Murray.
Dr. Murray didn't want the paramedics to give up at the house. He resisted when they wanted to basically call it. When he got to the emergency room, he also was insistent that we got to keep trying, we got to keep trying. But what we found out was that the other doctor that was in charge there said that she didn't see any signs of life. But there was this doctor who knew Michael Jackson who was saying, no, I felt a pulse. There's signs of life here. Let's keep trying. So they kept up some pretty desperate efforts to get Michael's heart beating again, to get him breathing again. And of course, there was no hope.
What's clear is that he wasn't honest with medical staff there about the drugs Jackson was taking, about the ailments he was suffering from, and about the treatment he'd given him.
He did not tell them about the propofol, which was probably the most important thing that he should have mentioned at the time.
Finally, the doctor who was in charge of the emergency room at UCLA Medical Center said, we're not trying anything. We've tried everything. There's nothing left to try. Let's call this. And so they stopped.
Michael Jackson is declared dead at the hospital. The family is in a room waiting. Conrad Murray, his physician who's supposed to be in charge of him, goes into the room with the family, and
I asked them if they had any questions. Is there anything I can do to help? They asked me, you know, do you know why he died? My answer was no. But they wanted me to review the press release to see if it was okay with me.
Jermaine did?
Yeah, Jermaine, he and AEG, Randy Phillips wanted me to look at that.
Michael Jackson passed away on Thursday, June 25th, 2009 at 2:26 p.m.
I added that because although he came in with what was presumed to be a possible cardiac arrest, the underlying cause of that condition is not known until an autopsy is performed.
It is believed he suffered cardiac arrest in his home. However, the cause of his death is unknown until results of the autopsy are known.
Something that's interesting, it was Conrad Murray that told doctors at UCLA that there should be an autopsy of Michael Jackson. He requested it.
Dr. Murray began asking the security detail right away for rides back to the Carrollwood residence. He wanted to avoid the world discovering that Michael Jackson had some cream back at the house. That's what he told the security detail, what his reasonings were for wanting to return to the Carrollwood residence. The security detail didn't think that was a real good idea, and collectively decided that we're just going to tell Dr. Murray that the law enforcement, the police department have taken our keys and no one can leave. Shortly after that, Dr. Murray spoke with detectives from West LA and did inform him that he was treating Michael Jackson for dehydration and exhaustion. He never mentioned any types of medication that he had given Mr. Jackson. And those detectives actually spoke and told Dr. Murray to stick around. Don't go anywhere. The detectives from Robbery Homicide are coming. They'd want to talk to you. Shortly after Detectives Smith and Martinez arrived at the hospital, they began calling Dr. Murray on the phone that he had provided to the West LA detectives. All their calls were met with voicemails, and eventually it just turned off. They actually went and looked at surveillance, and he was seen leaving through a side door of the hospital. We realized, okay, there's something going on here that we need to look into.
We're told that helicopter carrying Michael Jackson's body has left UCLA Medical Center, heading to the coroner's office.
After Michael's death, his body was taken to the Los Angeles County morgue.
The world was eager to know what really happened to the King of Pop. Many people thought that, if you read online, that Michael was murdered. Many people thought that he committed suicide. Many people thought maybe one of his handlers just did him in, because the fact of the matter is Michael was deeply in debt when he died, to the tune of $470-odd million. And it turns out, unfortunately, Michael was worth much more dead than alive.
You've been quoted as saying you believe it may have been murdered. Do you still think that?
Absolutely.
Begin with the latest on the memorial for Michael Jackson. There are estimates that this morning hundreds of millions will be planning to watch Michael Jackson's memorial service on TV and online tomorrow.
When Michael Jackson died, the family set out to make a funeral for him. And very good sources of mine told me they contacted the LAPD and wanted all the streets in downtown LA closed off for Michael Jackson's cortege so they could have, a proper mourning period.
The world was in mourning, and we needed some kind of a service, a focus. But it was going to take weeks before the family would ever sort out where Michael would be interred, who would pay for it, how that would come about. And so AEG Live and some of the others, the music companies and others, and friends of Michael Jackson came together and organized a memorial service for the public.
The ceremony itself cost $1 million.
This was July 7th at the Staples Center, and it was incredible.
When everybody congregated on stage, all the artists, to sing We Are the World, it really was a moving moment People felt goosebumps. I was there, and I felt goosebumps. At this memorial, they brought the children on stage, and Paris gave one of the most moving speeches I have ever heard.
Ever since I was born, Daddy has been the best father you could ever imagine.
After years of Michael Jackson covering his children's faces with masks or scarves when they went out in public, there they were at his memorial with no coverings. And it was sort of a jarring moment.
And we saw a blanket holding a doll, a Michael Jackson doll in his hand as his father's coffin was right in front of him. It was the most touching thing you can imagine.
Naturally, no one felt worse about the death of Michael Jackson than his family. I mean, this was a family that had raised him, gotten famous with him, been through hard times with him, and now he's dead. But it was a bizarre set of circumstances.
It was kind of strange to see family members who, by all accounts, were estranged, in the end, having to come together at that funeral and talk about their brother with the children. And also, they ended up having to fight for justice for their brother and for the truth to come out about exactly what happened. For years, there were rumors initially about how Joe Jackson treated his children, especially Michael Jackson. That is probably the last person Michael Jackson wanted as his spokesperson, was his father, Joe Jackson. It just so happens a couple days after Michael Jackson died, the BET Awards were happening. And so we set ourselves up on the red carpet. And then all of a sudden, Joe Jackson walks up. And so he walks up and I say, "How you doing, sir? How's the family holding up?"
I'm great. My family's doing pretty good.
Yeah?
Yes, they are.
You want to tell, the last couple of days, I know it's been really tough for you guys.
And
it was a slight pause when I go back and look at the tape, but in that moment, it seemed like forever.
We're working on that.
And then in the middle of the interview, I'm trying to get this heartfelt interview about Michael Jackson and the family. What about Janet and the rest of the family, the daughters and everything?
They're all doing fine. But I want to make this statement. This is a real good statement here. Marshall and I we owned a record company called
Ranch Records.
Right.
Okay, distributed by Blu-ray Technology. And that's his next step.
And I was flabbergasted.
We got a lot fixing to
He's
happen.
hawking his DVD on Blu-ray, and I'm like, okay, your son just died a couple of days ago. It was the oddest experience that I had ever had on live television.
It was a continuation of a bizarre family dynamic between the superstar son and all the hanger-ons.
How do you think he died? You've been quoted as saying you believe it may have been murder. Do you still think that?
Absolutely.
Why?
Absolutely.
Why are you so sure?
I would never, ever think differently. Because first of all, Michael told me that they were going to murder him. He was afraid. He was afraid for his life. Who was going to murder him? The people that were involved in his life, the people that were controlling him.
Without a doubt, Michael Jackson's worth more dead than alive. This has been proved with the escalation in the profits that his estate had made since his death. In fact, he's made more in the years since he died than the combined earnings of Jay-Z, Kanye West, and Taylor Swift. Given those figures, it's natural to assume conspiracy theories. People might suspect that AEG Live had a lot to gain from Michael Jackson dying.
They knew he wouldn't be healthy enough, yet they put their own doctor in who said, Michael, he passed with flying colors. He's in perfect health. Michael was not in perfect health. He was very, very fragile, very thin. And the coroners, I will tell you, this was not an OD. The coroners told me immediately that the only drug that was in Michael's body was the drug that was administered to him that night. And that was it. He was totally clean.
Do you think we'll ever find out the truth?
I'm going to make sure we do.
At the home, we're seeing motorcycles and activity outside the Michael Jackson home. Cara, tell our viewers what we're seeing.
We have just watched this group of police officers pull up, and I think they are actually securing off the area.
At that time, detectives from Robbery Homicide responded to the Carrollwood address, along with the Department of Coroner and their field investigators.
We're just looking for any evidence of foul play or anything like that.
They were directed upstairs, and they noticed an IV on an IV stand, some medicine on the nightstand near the bed, and one bottle of propofol that was underneath the nightstand. That was the first time in this investigation where propofol had been observed. So our biggest goal was to talk to Dr. Murray.
He was lying low. Perhaps that was on the advice of his attorneys. The LAPD called him, texted him, no response. It was only a couple of days later, 2 or 3 days later, when, on the advice of his attorney, Conrad Murray made contact with the LAPD and an interview was arranged.
Dr. Murray, full name? Conrad Robert Murray.
And he talked, and he gave him information.
We understand that you had been spending some nights at the house?
Not some nights. I spent every night.
Oh, every night?
With the exception of the nights I was off, which was on the Sunday.
Was it for medical reasons?
It was Mr. Jackson's request.
After the rehearsal on the 24th, when Michael Jackson got home, Dr. Murray was there waiting for him. Dr. Murray set up the saline IV and tried to get Jackson to go to sleep. He administered some sedatives, lorazepam and midazolam, and Jackson would only go to sleep for minutes and then wake up. And Jackson was very frustrated that he couldn't go to sleep.
At that time he said, I'd like to have some milk.
Milk?
He said, please give me some milk so that I can sleep, because I know that this is all that really works for me.
Hot milk or warm?
This is just a medicine.
What
that he was familiar with.
What is the medicine?
It's called propofol.
Well, that was the very first time that Dr. Murray used the word propofol.
Conrad Murray says that at about 10:40 in the morning, he pushed a very small amount of propofol intravenously into Michael Jackson, and that he watched him sort of fall asleep or go under, that he left the room for just a couple of minutes and came back and Michael wasn't breathing, and that he immediately started resuscitative efforts.
Now, the phone records, if you look at them, point to a different story altogether. In fact, Murray was on the phone for a lot of this time.
He was making phone calls between approximately 11:15, 11:17 a.m. for 45 more minutes, including to a girlfriend in Houston, Sadie Anding, the last person he called at 11:51.
She remembers Conrad Murray going silent, perhaps dropping the phone or putting it into his pocket and hearing a kerfuffle going on in the room. She didn't know what was going on. She had no idea, and hung up and called him back, just got his answer phone. There's an hour's difference there in his testimony. When did Michael Jackson receive propofol? What was Conrad Murray specifically saying? When did he come back in the room? Who's telling the truth?
Another big revelation from the police interview: what happened to Dr. Murray's medical bags on the morning Michael Jackson died? Murray was seen by Alberto Alvarez security and also a paramedic taking medicines and medical paraphernalia and putting them into bags.
Well, he put that bag in another room, and investigators never searched the other room, so they never found that bag.
What did you do with those syringes when you were done?
But I usually have my bags right there. Everything I use, I would put it quickly into the bags, and I just put it into the cover, because he wanted me to not have anything hanging around.
Where's your bag where those syringes would be at now? Oh, really?
And I believe that Dr. Murray fully believed that the Los Angeles Police Department had possession of his medical bag. I think it was for that reason Dr. Murray agreed to talk to us. He agreed to this interview with his lawyer to get out in front of the propofol and explain why he was giving propofol. So on Monday, June 29th, Detective Martinez had authored a search warrant for the residence of 100 West Carrollwood. We went directly to the closet that Dr. Murray had indicated his medical bag was, and inside there was a lot of medical debris and several bottles of propofol. And that was the treasure.
As far as police are concerned, Dr. Murray essentially handed them the smoking gun.
Tonight, breaking news. Preliminary word from the Los Angeles coroner on what killed Michael Jackson. The coroner is ruling Jackson's death a homicide.
The coroner concluded that Michael Jackson died of acute propofol intoxication. That was supplemented by the presence of benzodiazepines in his system. The combination of propofol with the benzodiazepines will inhibit the central nervous system, and that causes the heart to slow down. And so ultimately, if you're not careful, what can happen is cardiac arrest and respiratory failure, and that is exactly what happened in this case.
We assembled a book that contained our investigation, 11 books, and we sent these books to 11 specialists in a variety of medical expertise. They were each asked to render a medical opinion as to the level of care provided by Dr. Murray. All of them indicated to us that there was a major departure from the standard level of care. And in this particular case, the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office decided to charge Dr. Murray with manslaughter.
During opening statements, we heard a voice that none of us were expecting to hear.
Harper. When September 2011 came, it had been over 2 years since Michael Jackson passed away. Conrad Murray had been charged in his death, but so many questions remained. Was Murray to blame? What happened behind the closed doors of Jackson's mansion? With the trial came never-before-heard stories and new audio from prosecutors that shocked almost everyone.
It's day one in the trial of Conrad Murray, the doctor who is charged with involuntary manslaughter in the death of Michael Jackson.
On September 27, 2011, the trial started, People versus Conrad Murray.
The big day has arrived. Are you ready? Are you ready for your opening statement, sir?
I think we're ready. We're ready.
It was a madhouse outside the courthouse. Not like any courthouse I have ever seen around the country, and I've seen a lot of them.
And you're seeing this wild scene here as all the fans are protesting.
I remember the fans of Michael Jackson during the course of this long trial would line the hallway in the courthouse.
Many of them would applaud and cheer when the prosecution walked past and sort of give a stink eye to the defense.
Jermaine!
The Jackson family was in that trial every day. So you'd have Katherine Jackson, you'd have LaToya Jackson, you'd have Janet Jackson. And I remember that they would walk in, and sometimes the jury would already be seated. And you would just see this family that you've known through your television screen for your life. And it had to have impacted why we were all there.
At trial, jurors got two completely contradictory pictures of who Dr. Conrad Murray was. On one hand, his attorneys brought in a string of patients who described him as a kind, effective doctor who cared about his patients. And on the other hand, prosecutors described him as a opportunistic, money-grabbing doctor who was eager to make a windfall out of his treatment of Michael Jackson. Dr. Conrad Murray's defense's theory was that Michael Jackson had done something while Dr. Conrad Murray was out of the room, and leading to his own death. The prosecution's theory was that in a laundry list of ways, Dr. Conrad Murray was negligent as a physician, leading to his patient's death.
It was Dr. Murray's repeated incompetent and unskilled acts that led to Mr. Jackson's death on June 25th, 2009.
During opening statements, we heard a voice that none of us were expecting to hear, which was Michael Jackson himself. His words rang out from a recording that Conrad Murray had made at his bedside.
You believe my show? I wanted to say, I've never seen nothing like this in my life.
trials have their highs and lows, and many of them have a bombshell moment. This was that moment in Conrad Murray's trial.
No one had previously discussed this recording, disclosed the fact that it existed.
I'm thinking that Murray should have been children. The biggest in the world. Michael Jackson should have talked up.
Was unbelievable to hear how out of it he was.
He's under the influence of drugs. It was hard without some substantiation to even believe it was Michael Jackson. Yet Conrad Murray had recorded him like this. And for what?
And why would you record that?
I did not even recognize or realize that that recording was actually on my phone.
And I think the big moment is when they showed all the drugs.
2 milligrams.
You give this much of this, propofol, this much anti-anxiety, this much sleeping pills, and they put them all out on a table, and your jaw just dropped. How much medication and drugs could one person take?
Prosecutor David Walgren tallied for jurors how much propofol Conrad Murray had ordered to be shipped to Los Angeles, and he pointed out that it all added up to more than 4 gallons of propofol.
And I think one of the shocking things was he initially made the first order of propofol, very close in time to when he was hired by Michael Jackson. So all of a sudden you see that's the reason that Conrad Murray was his personal physician.
The biggest piece of evidence that we had was the audio tape of Conrad Murray talking to the police detectives. We went over that for hours and hours and hours. That was our main piece of evidence, and that's what we used the most, his own words.
He said, I can't function if I don't sleep. So I agreed at that time that I would switch over to the propofol.
Friday morning, we came back to actually start the deliberations. We still didn't know where anybody stood, so we decided that we would finally take a vote towards the end of the day on Friday and found out that it was 11-1. And when we talked to the juror again, he says, I don't care what you guys tell me. I am not changing my mind. He said, I am not going to vote guilty for Conrad Murray. I'm going to vote guilty for Alberto Alvarez, the security guard. We said, the security guard, he's not on trial. And we said, why would you vote? Why would you think that he was involved? He says, I believe that Alberto Alvarez has a secret insurance policy on Michael Jackson's life of $500,000. And I think he was in on this. And I think he's responsible for his death because he wanted to collect the insurance policy. So once we told the juror that he's not on trial, and he said, fine, I want to vote guilty on the personal chef, Kai Chase. Kai Chase, what did she do? She's not on trial. We, again, talked him out of that. So we thought, well, you give us your side of the story. You now convince us 11 guilties why we should switch to not guilty. And he said, well, the only reason I don't want to vote guilty is because I think if we vote guilty, we're going to give propofol a bad name. So we said, look, you are breaking the law, we told him, that if you are not following what the jury instructions say. And he says, well, I don't break the law. And then we knew we kind of had him. When we went back into that courtroom, my heart was pounding.
And we're following the breaking news this hour. A verdict to be announced any minute now in the involuntary manslaughter trial of Dr. Conrad Murray. And we're following the breaking news this hour. A verdict to be announced any minute now in the involuntary manslaughter trial of Dr. Conrad Murray, Michael Jackson's personal physician.
On November 7th, the jury returned with a verdict.
When we heard that a verdict had been reached, we all rushed to the courtroom. There was time, though, to assemble everyone before it was read. The judge took the bench. The jurors came in.
And we all walked out there, dead silence. You could have heard a pin drop.
I remember making a note that none of the jurors looked over at Conrad Murray. That's often a sign of bad news for a defendant.
As they were handing the verdict to the judge, and he looked at it, handed it to the clerk. And as she was reading it, my heart was just pounding.
We, the jury in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Conrad Robert Murray, guilty of the crime of involuntary manslaughter.
Somebody to my left screamed. I jumped a mile.
Michael Jackson's niece did let out a yelp. I mean, we all heard it. I mean, it's audible. I mean, I was she couldn't help it. As soon as she heard guilty of involuntary manslaughter, it was what she wanted to hear.
Dr. Conrad Murray is going to be escorted to jail right now until his formal sentencing on Tuesday, November 29th.
On the day of the sentencing, the judge imposed the maximum sentence.
The Honorable Michael E. Pastor, Judge presiding. Please be seated.
And he went off on this tangent and made Dr. Murray look like the most horrific person in the world.
Dr. Murray created a set of circumstances and became involved in a cycle of horrible medicine.
The judge, Judge Pastor, then sentenced him the maximum he could, 4 years in prison.
After the sentencing, when Dr. Murray was let off back to jail, he blew a kiss back to all of his supporters, Brooke.
Okay. Casey Wineforest in Los Angeles case this last
Michael's fans were infuriated because they believed he murdered the King of Pop.
There were many fans who believed that this should have been a second-degree murder charge. That's punishable by 15 years to life. Involuntary manslaughter, ultimately the decision the District Attorney Steve Cooley went with, easier to prove. I remember one day seeing a small plane circling overhead and trailing a banner behind it that was demanding murder charges, that was critical of the prosecution for bringing only a manslaughter charge. In fact, I had fans tell me that they were going to organize and defeat Steve Cooley's run for Attorney General of California. He did indeed run for Attorney General, and he did indeed get defeated. They credit themselves with a block of votes that supported his opponent.
I strongly believe that if Michael Jackson hadn't have been the victim, that Dr. Murray would not have been charged with a felony. It would have been a medical board proceeding. You know, he might have lost his license or been suspended for a while, but it never would have turned into a felony conviction.
There was never any attempt by Murray to, Michael Jackson was his lifeline. Michael Jackson was a source of income for Mr. Murray. They both needed each other.
The jurors felt that we did think he was a good friend, and we even thought that he's probably a good doctor. He just made a very bad decision.
Conrad Murray is now a free man after being released overnight in Los Angeles. He served nearly 2 years of a 4-year sentence for involuntary manslaughter.
Dr. Murray was released from prison in October 2013. A month after Dr. Murray was released from jail, I spent Thanksgiving with Dr. Murray and his family and friends. Nicole, Dr. Murray's girlfriend, wanted us to play Family Feud. It was a CD you put into the DVD player, you know. The second question for our team was, name the top 5 reasons a person can't fall asleep. It was like a movie script, I swear. It was crazy.
What was the number one answer?
The number one answer was insomnia, and nobody on our team got that answer.
Do you take any responsibility in Michael Jackson's demise, in his death?
You know, I am very remorseful that Michael has passed away. Michael was a friend. I felt as though I was protecting Michael all the time. I did.
What are your feelings towards Dr. Conrad Murray?
I can't even describe the way I feel about him. He did a terrible thing, and it might have been others involved. I don't know that, but I feel that.
Michael's mother, Katherine Jackson, has just filed a lawsuit against AEG.
And the mother of the
The late pop star Michael Jackson has filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the company behind his planned comeback tour in the UK. In the suit, Catherine Jackson claims that AEG Live was responsible for her son's health because it hired and directed his doctor, Conrad Murray.
Michael Jackson's family was looking for someone to blame, and they were blaming AEG.
His family is seeking more than $1 billion in damages.
Michael Jackson's mother, Catherine Jackson, hired a team of powerful lawyers to go after AEG Live, to sue them for Michael Jackson's death, arguing that Michael would be alive if they had taken better care of him, not pressured him to perform, not hired the doctor that went to prison for his death. Of course, AEG Live said, we didn't hire him, Michael brought him to us.
And the sad truth here is Mr. Jackson's death was caused by his choices. And it would have happened, no matter what, with or without AEG Live.
In closing arguments, Brian Panish, the lawyer for Catherine Jackson, actually acknowledged that Michael Jackson contributed to his own death.
And I'm not going to deny that Michael had used prescription drugs, that people had told him that it's risky to use propofol. I'm not denying that, and we'll never deny that. And we know that, and that's what the people said, and there's no reason to deny it.
The jury ultimately decided that Dr. Murray was not incompetent, that so AEG couldn't be held liable for hiring an incompetent doctor because they said he was a medical doctor. It was really kind of an odd verdict.
Concert promoter AEG Live found not liable for Michael Jackson's death. A jury cleared AEG of wrongdoing and awarded the Jackson family, therefore, nothing.
Good morning there, Chris. This was a shocker of a verdict given how complex and how long this trial went on.
Michael Jackson was pretty used to getting his own way. Anybody said no, well, they were out of the mix, and he'd find somebody else.
Everybody needed something. Conrad Murray needed the cash. Michael Jackson needed the drugs. AEG Live needed the show to take place. Ultimately, none of that happened, and nobody won. Everybody lost. The names of Conrad Murray and Michael Jackson will always be linked together. In fact, Michael Jackson once foretold this by telling Conrad Murray that, you know, our names will be linked forever. And when Conrad Murray asked Michael Jackson, how do you know that? Jackson said, I'm a clairvoyant.
It seems that the story is over. It's a tragedy. We lost Michael Jackson.
The world lost someone they'll never get back.
This is a very sad tale. Shakespeare couldn't have written this story any more dramatically or tragically.
I think his legacy is what it should be, one of the greatest performers, songwriters, and human beings of all time.
You know, Michael Jackson's real legacy is his music, is his art. And with Michael Jackson, the person, out of the picture, I think future generations can focus once again on what made Michael Jackson great. That's his music.
How does it feel when you go in to do a concert somewhere and literally there are tens of thousands of people that are rushing over to you just to get a glimpse?
That's a wonderful feeling, especially when you see them smiling, and I love the fans. I think it's very sweet. I feel thankful is how I feel. I really do. I don't take any of it for granted.
For me and millions of others, Michael's genius and legacy live on. As for Dr. Murray, his medical license was suspended in California and Nevada and revoked in Texas. He turned down our interview request, but self-published a book of his version of events. He still maintains he did nothing wrong. We all miss you, Michael. Thanks for watching. Good night.
I grew up poor. I had no money. My family was poor.